Why Do Fools Fall in Love isn't really about romance. It's about how fame freezes certain people emotionally while everyone around them keeps paying the price.
Frankie Lyman became a superstar before he was mature enough to understand money, love, addiction, or even responsibility. The tragedy of this film is that every woman connected to Frankie loved a different version of him.
And by the end, the movie quietly asks whether anybody ever truly knew who Frankie Lyman was beneath the celebrity.
So, Why Do Fools Fall in Love from 1998 was the biopic that you guys said you wanted us to cover next. And so it's this musical drama, kind of a biographical drama, and maybe even a romance that was based on the true story of Frankie Lyman, who was the lead singer of the pioneering rock and roll group, The Teenagers, for 1 year. And so the film highlights these three women in his life, each of whom claimed to have married Frankie Lyman. The movie examines how Frankie Lyman's fame emotionally and financially destroyed both him and the women who were connected to him, while the film examines the difference between loving someone and truly knowing them. So, just as a disclaimer, with these biopics, there are a lot of fictional sorts of scenes and dialogue that happen in there. Some parts are changed completely and stuff like that. So, just for full disclosure, we are just covering the film as presented, and we'll only discuss any glaring inconsistencies. But I know a lot of people like to go, "Oh, this film was totally, fake," or, different things like that, which I think are great things that we can bring up in the comments. But, as far as our covering, we're covering how well the film was made, whether it was believable, and generally the story that was presented, because ultimately, who knows what really happened? We don't always know what really happened in in these movies as presented. So just to say that. And if you guys do know stories, we'd love to hear about them in the comments regarding this film and stuff that really happened or didn't happen, and we can talk about it there. Also, just to let you guys know, we do have a biopic playlist that's linked in the description of the biopics, because we've only recently, maybe within the last few months, started to actually cover biopics. One of the things that really made us do it is the release of the movie Michael. So you can catch all of that through the link in the description if you want to see the other movies that we've covered. All right, so this movie was directed by Gregory Nava, and it stars Halle Berry, Vivica Fox, Layla Rashawn, and Lorenz Tate, who portray Frankie Lyman and his wives, and then Little Richard, who also appears in the film as himself. And Miguel Nunez plays Little Richard in this movie when Little Richard is younger. So as we sort of touched on, the main themes of the movie are fame and exploitation and what happens when you become a star at a young age, love and illusion, financial manipulation, the cost of celebrity, and then women surviving around unstable men, which seems to be a running theme with these biopics, because that was really a big theme with What's Love Got to Do with It, Tina Turner's story that we have recently talked about on this channel. But at any rate, we got to get to it. We are about to spoil Why Do Fools Fall in Love from 1998.
I'm Heit.
And I'm Cheri.
And you've discovered Axiom Amnesia.
We want to thank all of the supporters who helped to make this video possible. If you want your name to appear alongside these contributors, make a one-time donation via Cash App, or you can head on over to patreon.com/axiomamnesia to enjoy all of the benefits of becoming a monthly subscriber. So the film, we can just break up into three different acts: Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. And so we'll call Act 1 the rise of this teenage star. So at just 13 years old, Frankie Lyman rises from the streets of Harlem to national fame when Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers explode onto radios and jukeboxes with their 1956 hit, Why Do Fools Fall in Love? And I really like the fact that this movie is named after that, because the story, it just really is kind of tells the story of him and his wives. And then also the fact that this song was such a big hit, and who would know that the person who helped to write the song and the voice that we hear on the song would have such a tragic story happen to him. And he was almost kind of, he had a couple hits, but he was really kind of like a one-hit wonder.
Right, and it was about the resurgence of this song in the early 80s that really led to the lawsuits that led to all this stuff being revealed in this way.
Yeah. So the group quickly becomes one of the biggest young acts in America. It appears in films like Rock, 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 and then later Mr. Rock and Roll. So charismatic, talented, and suddenly surrounded by money and fame and attention, Frankie becomes one of the earliest Black teenage pop stars during the rise of rock and roll. However, as success grows, Frankie struggles with the pressures of celebrity, emotional immaturity, and the people profiting from his talent. So basically, early on in the movie, we wind up seeing Frankie meet Zola Taylor as well as Mickey. So Mickey was played by Vivica A. Fox, and she was the first woman who he, had married supposedly. And then the second woman was, again, Zola Taylor, who was from the group The Platters. So The Platters was a singing group. They had a woman who was out front singing lead in these songs. And this is Zola Taylor. And one of the interesting things to me about the relationship he had with Zola was, he met her. She's an industry person and everything like that. But I felt like she was so much older than him.
Well, she was. She was probably only about 6 years older than him, right? So this is where the whole timeline of the marriages come into it, and how the timeline of the film don't necessarily line up. Right? So if you look at those ages, by the time he is, 16, then she's about 24. And if he's like 18, well, she's like 18, she's like 24, 16, she's 22. You know what I'm saying? But she was like 6 years older than him.
Yeah, and then, we got to ask the question, if she was a man, wouldn't we say that she was being predatory?
Exactly. In the movie, right? But if they didn't actually meet in that way until the 60s, then he is of age.
Right. Which is a different thing, but it changes the game because he was 13 when he broke on the scenes. He was a child, and so although it's unclear exactly what age they may have first met, it's just he was just really young. And this is one of the things about Larenz Tate playing Frankie Lyman, and Larenz Tate in really all of his roles with women when he was younger, because I guess the first time I ever really saw him was as O-Dog in Menace to Society. And so then the next time I probably saw him was in
Inkwell, maybe?
Inkwell, yeah, the Inkwell. And obviously Jada Pinkett was older than him in the Inkwell, as his female love lead. She looks young. So anyway, the bottom line is I always kind of feel like Larenz Tate looks a lot younger than his co-stars. And this movie was no different. But in this case, he was depicting someone who actually was quite a bit younger, maybe, than his not only his co-stars, but the characters themselves, what they were supposed to be, the ages that they were supposed to be.
And I think they deliberately didn't point out his age in the movie in a way, right? So you don't know that all of this stuff is happening when he's like 14, 15.
Right. So basically what happens is that in Act 2 of the movie, we might as well just call that fame and addiction and emotional instability. So after he leaves the teenagers to pursue a solo career, Frankie initially continues finding success, but his popularity quickly begins to fade. Let me just hop in here and let you guys know that we do have some co-executive producer opportunities. And right now we have a sale that is for a limited time, but it's 3 for $25. So you'll get $5 off if you want to get a kind of a bundle of 3 of those at the same time. And so I'm going to link in the description where you can find a link to that. But this is a way to support the channel because, as we have told you guys before, we are being forced to move to a more viewer supported model of the channel because YouTube ain't been YouTubing like it used to YouTube anymore, and we're just doing our best to continue to be able to offer the topics at length that everybody expects. And so we are trying to keep our heads above water, and so we need your help with that, and we appreciate it. Links in the description. Now, the story behind what happened with the teenagers and how they broke up. So he starts out, it's Frankie and the teenagers and everything. And then he winds up with the record label and management and stuff like that, where you know how they do. They only want the person they feel like they can make the star because they're able to split the money up fewer ways. So at first it was like, oh, we're the teenagers, then it's Frankie Lyman and the teenagers, and suddenly it's just Frankie Lyman. And we've seen this many times before, right? It's the Supremes, then Diana Ross and the Supremes, and then it's just Diana Ross, and it's Destiny's Child, and then it eventually is just Beyonce. And so that is going on, but there was definitely some bad blood between the teenagers and Frankie Lyman, and the film depicts like how he felt bad and he felt weak because he basically went along with what he understood them doing, which was cutting out the teenagers out of the deal. Which, we've seen this happen time and time again, like some of the early stories of even with Toni Braxton and her sisters. They were a group, the Braxtons, when she was with them. And then she gets with LA and Babyface, and they're kind of like, yeah, we don't want your sisters. We just want you. And then, she became famous. And I guess there was a little bit of consolation for her because her sisters were background singers for her in the beginning. And then they came out as the Braxtons, a few years later with a trio. And then after they did that, then, they did various sort of solo careers and stuff like that along the way. But, the film also really touches on like the exploitation that you see in the music business. And this is not unlike some of the dynamic that we saw with What's Love Got to Do with It as well, right? Because the music business is just kind of dirty, and it's been that way along the entire time. And some of these movies that we're watching are taking place in the 60s and maybe a little bit later. And especially these Black artists were really, really being exploited by the record labels at this point in time. So that's what's going on. So he has a little bit of success, but then his success and popularity start to fade. And so by the time he actually reaches adulthood, his music career is pretty much collapsing under the weight of his addiction and instability and his poor decisions. So the film kind of goes back and forth between the 1950s, 1960s, and the 1980s, because we're looking at this courtroom drama between these three wives trying to decide who's going to get the royalties, and then each of them telling their stories about how they met Frankie and what happened. So we're left to kind of piece together these different perspectives on how things went down and stuff like that. And so through these flashbacks and the testimony, the audience sees definitely conflicting versions of who Frankie is through the eyes of these three women who are claiming to be his lawful widow, right? And so the other thing is Elizabeth Waters and that's Mickey, the character played by Vivica A. Fox. She was kind of different because they label her kind of as this kind of hustler, this petty thief and stuff like that. And so she didn't have all of the advantages like that Zola Taylor had. She wasn't famous. She wasn't accomplished really in any way, but she was very dedicated to Frankie. She loved him and she wanted to be with him and stuff like that. Then we get to the third wife, who is this Georgia school teacher, Emira Eagle, who's played by Layla Rashawn. And so all of these women, though, are very different. You have the good girl wife, that's Emira Eagle, the school teacher and everything. Then you have the one who's very sophisticated and accomplished in the world that Frankie Lyman wants to be in the world of entertainment, Zola Taylor, who was of the Platters until she separated from them. And then you have Elizabeth Waters, Mickey, and she just is kind of scrapping it and getting it however she can. In fact, at the beginning of the film, she's in jail or prison, serving time for, her petty crimes or whatever. So then everything kind of comes to a head because we kind of understand the cost of chasing Frankie Lyman for all of these women. So Frankie's life spirals into further downward progression as addiction destroys both his career and his personal relationships. And so since his music career was basically over by the time he was 18, and then at the age of 25, just 7 years later, he has a heroin overdose and he dies. So in the years following his death, this battle over his royalties, becomes emotionally and financially draining for everybody. And so eventually what happens is the initial ruling is that Mickey is the lawful wife because to long story short, these women had various relationships throughout their lives. Some of them might have been undivorced from their previous husband or the person that they left and stuff like that, or, didn't have the appropriate documentation, just a whole bunch of different things.
So Waters was the first wife back in the 50s. And
then he married Zola Taylor.
So back in the 50s. And she was already married when they got married.
Right.
To somebody else. And then Zola Taylor, but they never had any documentation of their marriage. And then Elmira Eagle married him like a year before he died.
Right. And
so first they were like, oh, Waters because she's first. And then, on appeal, it was.
Well, Waters because she's first, but even though she was married to somebody else, because where it came in was under common law. Right. So she was married, but then she was divorced. She actually was divorced, but she just wasn't divorced before she married Frankie Lyman. But because she and Frankie continued a relationship after her divorce and as presenting themselves as husband and wife, then that was acknowledged as her being legally married under common law to him. And that's why she was awarded. And then, of course, on appeal, Elmira, the one who, Layla Rashawn's character, the one who was a school teacher, then eventually won on appeal. And what was so crazy was that it took years and years of this courtroom battle. And at the end, when she finally wins, by the time she paid the lawyers and everybody else their cut, she only got $15,000, which was the price that they were offering to settle her in the for her to settle in the beginning. And one of the other things that we do see in the film, so pretty much that's how the film ends, is with the understanding that all of this fighting was kind of like for nothing. But there are points where it seems that the three women come together like, hey, maybe we should split the money and everything like that. But as soon as Mickey saw that she won the initial court case, then she was like, I'm not splitting money with you all. The only time she was willing to split was when it looked like maybe, who knows who's going to actually win.
When you don't win, we're going to split it.
Yeah.
If I don't win, I want to split the money.
And if I do win, then, F you. And that's pretty much how she was operating. So that's really kind of in a nutshell, what happened in the film. But the other part that was depicted was how the effects of, what happens when you have a spouse who is chemically addicted. And that's really what happened to Frankie Lyman. And unfortunately is the story of many musicians as well as other types of artists along the way. And so we should take a look at this clip of just like this crazy, crazy, crazy situation that happens with Mickey and Frankie. And so just to set this up, Frankie was on dope and we know that, right? So he passed out while he was performing. Somebody help me! Help me! And so Mickey, who is newly married to him, sent him to rehab.
Frankie was my husband and I had to do something.
And the rehab hospital she sent him to was really expensive.
So I checked him into a hospital. It was expensive.
So Mickey was like, I'm getting out here getting the money any way that I can and whatever. And the Lord says that you support your husband and all this.
The Bible says that a wife should do anything to save her husband.
So then we look up, Mickey is literally hoeing on the streets to pay for his rehab.
You want to have some fun tonight? I'll lick you like a lollipop.
And so then she gets in the car with this guy.
Come on, hop in. All right. See you, girl.
And then he turns out to be a police officer. She gets arrested.
Damn, man, what?
So after she gets arrested and bails herself out and returns home to her little apartment, still trying to, make the money and make things work out while Frankie is in rehab, supposed to be getting clean, here he is on her floor, drunk, passed out, and she wakes him up like, what are you doing here?
Frankie, what are you doing here? I'm paying for you to be at that hospital.
So let's just take a look at that scene. I just want to hop in here and let you guys know that if you are not a member with Axiom Amnesia, you are missing out on over 100 exclusive member-only videos. Just letting you know that. And by member, we mean if you're not an Axiom.app member, a Patreon member, or a YouTube channel member. All of these memberships that we offer on these various platforms have access to over 100 exclusive member-only videos that the folks on YouTube that are just watching the video like this one don't have access to. Members get exclusive access, like I've said, to the private archive of videos, early access to some videos. You get your name listed as a contributor in the videos, just like you saw at the beginning, scrolling, and more. So be sure to check out the description for links on how to become a member. We appreciate it in advance. Just another way to support the channel. When Mickey arrives home, there is an eviction notice on the door.
Yeah.
Which almost seems like a baseline because she had already been through a bunch with Frankie, him getting beaten up, them having to give their rent money and then getting evicted or whatever from another apartment. Like, life is hard with Frankie, you know, which you would think that with his star, you know, having risen and everything, you know, like that would be it. And I think that that's the sad part is when people make it, they feel like they've made it like that's a permanent state. And how many times do we see people who make it and we never hear from them again? And they're like, but as long as I make it, you know, like I'm set for the rest of my life. And they really aren't. Even still, look at all of the old head entertainers who were up in the 80s and in the 90s. And, you know, where are they today? And they're out like still touring. Some of them really up in age, but they can't stop touring, you know, and it's really sad. So there's this eviction notice on the door and Frankie is on the, you know, in there talking about, oh, I didn't like that place. Them people mean, they didn't treat me right.
Baby, I didn't like that place. People mean, they didn't treat me right.
And it was almost like he was like a little baby, but he is a younger man at this point, right? He's not mature, let's be clear. And so then he wakes up and he's like, well, pack your stuff.
Look, won't you pack your stuff up and we getting out of here. We getting out of this place.
You going back to Philly with your mama for a while.
You gonna go back to Philadelphia with your mama for a while.
And I'm going with Zola out to LA.
I'm going out to LA with Zola.
Because she got some gigs for me. So never mind that Zola is his, you know, ex and everything like that.
And all you can think about is your snot-nosed old girlfriend?
But he's telling his wife, go be with your mother in Philly while I go and try to still pursue my career. Never mind that she literally has been on the street selling her body to get the money to just get him off of dope.
Boy, I am out here looking for your ass because you can't stay clean.
Now, the grace I give him is that clearly he is still an addict and he's not in his right mind and he's not thinking like, you know, thinking correctly. But at the end of the day, you know, there are plenty of people that we've seen who weren't on dope who would make a similar decision. I just need to be famous. So whatever I'm going to do, it doesn't matter. You know, my personal relationships will all suffer because I'm chasing fame. And Frankie was kind of like no different. And how would that ever be okay? Y'all let us know in the comments. Would it be okay for your husband, your spouse, whatever, to say, go back and live with your parents and I'm going to go out on the road with my ex to try to get back some of the fame that I used to have? Is anybody cool with that? Because that just doesn't feel right to me.
Want to make money?
It just, well, why she got to go back to her mother? Like he ain't even got himself together.
Go live? Right. That's why she got to go to the mother. Where else she gonna live?
I just don't like it, but okay.
Yeah, well.
I mean, so this is when she really snapped.
Take your sorry, junky, stank ass and get on out of here.
Mickey is like, I have had it. You know, I've been out on the street doing all this to get this money for you. And basically she's upset and furious because it's like he doesn't respect her sacrifice that she's made for him. You know, and then she says to him the thing that just destroys folks' ego, which is like, you ain't got nothing, you ain't never had nothing, and you ain't, you know, shit, and you ain't never gonna be shit.
Because you don't want shit, you ain't got shit, and you ain't never gonna be shit.
Like, she broke him down in that moment. And so then in retaliation, now he's angry, and he's like, do you know who the F I am?
You know who the fuck I am?
You know, and in this moment when he delivers this line, it really reminds me a lot of the way that O-Dog talked in Menace to Society. I was like, oh, a little O-Dog came out, you know. But she's like, I know who you were.
I know who you were.
And I know that had to cut too, right? Because think about it. Frankie probably wasn't 100% in control of whether his star would fall after he had, you know, a couple of good hits. Now, it would have helped if he probably wasn't addicted, but even still, one could argue that he wasn't in control of that. But, you know, some of that is just the luck of the draw. And he had a few hits and then that was it. So Frankie grabs the dog.
Frankie, what are you doing?
Her little bitty dog, and holds the dog out the window.
I'm gonna toss this motherfucker. Now what? Toss this motherfucker.
And she's like, oh my gosh, because, you know, she loves this dog. And he's like, get on your knees. She is begging and crying and pleading as he holds this dog out of the window of, I don't know, their apartment is like at least maybe the second floor. or third floor up in the air. And the dog is like hollering. She's hollering.
You don't understand me. You don't care about me. All you care about is a stupid fucking dog. Huh?
And Frankie is like, look at you, you stupid, you know, like taunting her.
Look at your hair. Frankie.
Because of her reaction to being mortified with him basically threatening. He's like, I'll throw this dog, you know.
I'll throw this motherfucker, huh?
And then he's like, get on your knees. And she continues to beg and cry.
Get on your fucking knees. Get on your fucking knees and apologize to me.
And then he laughs at her. I ain't gonna do nothing to this dog. I ain't gonna do nothing to this dog.
I ain't gonna do nothing to this dog.
But the dog bites him, and then he drops the dog. You know, when I first saw this, I was like, wait, what?
Motherfucker bit me. I'm sorry, baby.
So he drops the dog, and you know what happens to the dog, or we can assume what happens to the dog, and see that the dog doesn't make it.
I'm sorry, Mickey. I'm sorry, baby. You bit me. No,
so now she's totally distraught, and she's screaming. She physically fights him and whatever.
I didn't mean to do it. She bit me.
And he's trying to calm her down. Baby, I didn't mean it. I'm sorry, you know, and all of that. She just is too done at this point. And so then after that, she's just like, you know, get out.
Get out, Frankie. You gotta go. Can't take no more.
And she cries and fights him some more. And, you know, this reminds me of the scene from Baby Boy where Jody and Yvette fight. And Yvette is just so done when she finally takes her car back from Jody, you know, that it's just like she just in this moment is done. Now, Yvette goes back to Jody in the movie, and so does Mickey. Mickey would like to go back and still be with him after that. She still loved him. So, but he takes his stuff and he leaves or whatever. He's like, oh, I'm sorry, baby. I'm sorry.
I didn't mean it, baby.
And she's just like, I can't take it no more. I can't take it. Just get out. And she is just crying like her soul is gone. And this was just like, this to me was in a nutshell what each of those women sort of experienced with him because of his addiction and maybe his selfishness on top of that. But definitely his addiction played a huge role into that. So, and we know that this touches her even years later, because even when they flip back to the present day, when she's in court testifying to this having happened, they have to stop and take a break because she's crying just remembering this incident having happened.
May I request a short recess, please?
Want us to break down the movie of your choice? Well, you choose the film and we'll do the analysis. You will be credited as the sole executive producer. The link to grab one is in the description, and our deep dive on demand is just $75. We have a big promotion that's coming up soon, so check that link to see if it's on sale. And I was like, man, that's cold-blooded that you would do that to the dog, though. Even though it was an accident to you know what I'm saying? Like, it would have never happened if he never picked the dog up in the first place and did that. It was crazy. So let's talk about these three different women and kind of the purposes they served in his life and why it could wind up like it did. You know, I was thinking Mickey was like the I'll do anything for you kind of type of woman. She's like, I will go out on these streets and I will sell myself in order to get money to take care of you. Zola, though, to me was like, okay, I like you, but I'll do a little something to help you. But Zola was really kind of more about herself. She was more balanced, I think, even though her feelings were hurt by what happened in their relationship. Because at one point, Zola comes home to her nice fancy house in Hollywood or whatever, or the LA area. I don't know if it was in Hollywood, but, you know, somewhere in LA. He's there with Mickey at her house. And then so her and Mickey get into a fight and stuff, and she's chasing Mickey around. And so her feelings were definitely hurt, but I always felt like she had money, she was stable, and she was going to be okay because she had an entire career and fame in her own right, you know. And then, of course, Amira was the good girl, you know, school teacher and whatever. And so toward the end, when he married her, then, you know, he just basically walks out on her. He gets the idea when somebody recognizes him that maybe I should go back and try one more time for fame, which was crazy. Remember that scene where the mailman comes to the door and he's like, Frankie Lyman, you Frankie Lyman? He's like, yeah, I'm Frankie Lyman. And he's like, man, I thought you was dead. I was, why do we say stuff like that?
Because that's just who we are.
Why? Like, it just be our people. Why do we say stuff like that? He was like, so when he said that, that really hurt Frankie. And Frankie, that was the thing. And I don't know if this was real or not, but it certainly was a good element of the film where he, it's like, I got to get I'm just going to go back and try to make it one last time. And that one last time was truly one last time because he ultimately went out there to try to make it again in LA and OD'd. And his brother was the one to have to bring the news back to his wife. Amira at that point. But I think she also was the type of wife who was like, I believe in your dreams. I believe in you. I'm here, and she watched him walk away and never saw him again after he left to go to LA. And so I don't know. This is my theory and you can tell me what you think. I think that he was just different with each of them because they were different, right? He was he got something different from each of these women and they weren't exactly all at the same time. By the time he was with Amira, he wasn't with Mickey.
Yeah,
and,
but I don't think they described him all different except when he was clean with the last wife, Eagle, and he was in the military, but he was still trying to get those glory days back, going off and trying to perform and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I think they were all the same. Since he was a kid, he was addicted to heroin. So, and I think they all described the same person, but to them, they all felt he was different because you view people in the way that you interact with them, right? So if Waters is like, I'm doing everything and love is unconditional, then other people who don't believe in unconditional love will think that she got a different version that would amount to something like that. Right? Because you think that love is conditional and, he's on drugs and he's running off and doing things, then I won't treat him good. Right? He don't deserve that treatment, which would mean that maybe he was being treated. He was a better person for this person to treat him like unconditional love is a thing rather than just a term that is said.
So do you think that anyone, okay, we know it's a legal matter and everything, but based on the story that was told, do you feel like any one of the women deserved the money more than the others? Because Zola never, it was never on the table for Zola. In the end, the fight came down to between Mickey and
whoever needed the most, but it's probably everybody along the way is just kind of my thing in a sense, right? If you have enough, right? So I'm sure most of the money probably came from this film itself.
Right. To the estate. Yeah,
and whatever royalties from the song that came out of that, right? Because it probably gets streamed more to this day because of the movie from the 90s.
And they talk about how it was millions of dollars. Was it $4 million? I think they said $4 million. Anyway, it was definitely more than $1 million. And I feel like maybe $1 to $4 million was the amount that this one song made in royalties. And it was also exposed how the dude at the record label had basically evolved the songwriter so that he himself.
Old. Yeah. So the thing is that Why Do Fools Fall in Love was written by the teenagers, but it was credited to 3 of them on the original record. And then when they signed, then later on, it mentioned Frankie Lyman and some other person, right? Who was the guy at the record label, right? And then they sold off the company that owned, I don't know if they sold off the masters or whatever, but whatever company could have been administrator was holding possession of that publishing. That catalog was sold to this mobster guy, Morris Levy. And then Levy, he somehow became the songwriter.
Which is just crazy.
Yeah, and never paid, right? Because especially in the 60s, like nowadays, it's kind of required that the streaming services or platforms report. So the different organizations like Sound Exchange and stuff, they're getting their reports, right, from, and your PROs, they're getting their reports from these streaming companies. Back in the day, you had to audit the record labels or whatever reporting came from the radio, right? So that's kind of what makes it harder back then because you had to physically, you didn't know, right? And sound scan and stuff that came even later, so back in the 60s you definitely don't know what's going on with any of the stuff. You don't know how many times anything getting played. You probably don't know all the placements of the songs.
That's
right?
just how many ways you could be robbed and not know it.
Right. So like whoever I'll give you an example on YouTube. I seen somebody, they done a video about something and then they use a video clip, right? And they attribute the clip to the channel where they got the clip from. But the person who got the clip basically got it from an archive from a university. So the one who's attributed with the credit ain't even the person who owns the rights to that work.
Right.
So, yeah. So that sort of things could be happening, especially like, let's say in 1980. And I did a video on my channel about, this Future song, or I think it's Future, whoever, Metro Boomin and them. But
we'll link that in the description.
Yeah, in the early 80s, this song gets popular, goes in commercials and Diana Ross and all that stuff that went on in those times, right? They may be paying who they think the owners are.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Until, a wife is like, wait, no, Frankie Lyman ain't even getting this cut and he's the writer of this.
Which is just nuts. The whole thing is nuts. And I think it's been even more complicated because you have more people who are creating content for, I want to say for lack of a better word, but I guess that's
They're creating content
the best way to describe it.
Even learning about intellectual property rights. And it's come to what some people would love is that there is no ownership of intellectual property in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people like that philosophy where, anybody could just take anything and nobody owns anything.
When in reality, if you're using works from people, whether that's music, whether that's a video, whatever, then you should be attributing credit to them and it should be falling under what actually would be fair use of that if you're not actually paying to license that work.
But even if you're paying, some people just think that it just should not.
You know,
no one should own anything.
No one should own, but you know, and it's always the people who don't create anything who think
No,
that.
I'm just saying there's this philosophy of people who don't believe in intellectual property in that way.
Yeah.
Like legitimately.
And I'm saying that the people that I hear tend to say that are the people who are not typically the creative ones.
Okay.
That's just my feeling.
Yeah, I'm talking about like the people who espouse these views before everybody jumped on social media in the 2010s and stuff, right? That these ideas existed. People who create a lot and actually release things into Creative Commons.
So yes, those people do exist.
Right. And then there are people who all they do is just steal and they don't create, but they don't have any knowledge of intellectual property anyway, right? Those are like two totally different people, because all I want to do is steal. I don't even need to know about, rights or anything. And then there are people that have actual philosophies about intellectual property.
Y'all already know that we have merch, but I just want to remind you right quick, and this is one of my favorites, the Axiom Amnesia logo hoodie. And I think it's really cute. It's a great way to support the channel, but we also have mugs and t-shirts and all sorts of other things. So visit axiom.app for all of our merch that we have available. But that's kind of that's the gray area, because I feel like that about when I see people who are doing supposed like reactions and even some things that people would call commentary, where they're not actually transforming anything. They're literally like, let's say a person on TikTok does some research and, which is rare, but let's just say they actually do real research and they take the time to put something together and they present it as a cohesive piece. Then person B comes along and they just plop their face on the screen and they're like, oh, I have to be in a video. So they act like they're watching this along with you. And then maybe they say, oh, that's crazy or whatever, every so often.
Let's say 15 years ago or over 10 years ago, one of the first red pill guys. Remember the early days of the red pill guy? I forgot this guy's name, but I put together this whole video. It was like some music and then kind of splicing together these political speeches with other imagery and stuff, right? And we have our channel. We put it out, and then we didn't monetize our channels.
Oh,
back then.
yes. I
And
remember.
then he took the video and put it on his channel, and then he's talking about, "No, I'm trying to get y'all some views, man. If you don't get out of here," and he monetized it, right? And put ads
and he
stuff on there.
monetized it. So here are stuff that we had put together with appropriate attribution. So he took it, and then, like I said, when confronted, it's further justification as to I'm doing you a favor. No, F you, bro.
Yeah.
You know, you're not doing me a favor.
Oh man, you remember his name? What's that guy's name? Y'all who are around, y'all know this guy. He would just talk greasy online about black women.
Yeah, what's his? It's a Spanish name, wasn't it? Didn't he have a Spanish last?
I don't even remember. But he got kicked off all his platforms, and he kept trying to come back on YouTube. Somebody in the comments know this guy.
Yeah, but I mean,
but that happened a few times. We came across some.
Yeah, I mean, just crazy stuff. And then, I mean, other things with like intellectual property that have happened where we had covered a Netflix special. Okay, that Netflix holds the copyright, and someone came as a
and tried to claim our video.
Came and claimed our video as a representative. Basically, it was the agent of the person who was doing, like, it was a stand-up. And so the agent of the person doing the stand-up, and, you know, not only did they claim it, they struck the channel. And I was like, oh boy, nah. So, you know, we got in touch with him and whatever. And what changed it was when we began to ask questions about who held the copyright, though.
Yeah. So, like, that's why I say this, because people need to know that for their own, you know, thing. Because we could have just been like, dang, they got us. But no, you have to prove that you are the owner of this thing. And I know you're not the owner because I know how this thing works, because I've been into it for decades, right? I read about this thing and I stay abreast about it, right? So I think I just say this so that other creatives, even if you ain't gonna go by it, and, you know, I don't care if I'm stealing this and that, you still need to know.
Right.
What
and it's
you're
not
doing.
enough.
It's part of it. It ain't enough
to just say fair use, and yell that at because I've seen people be like, fair use, you know, literally say that. No, actually.
Right. Because, like, if somebody did something and what we did wasn't actually a fair use, you could just be like, yeah, they got me, because you understand that you're skirting the line at times and stuff, right? But then there's times where you need to stand 10 toes down and say, no, this is exactly fair use. But I think people just think there's this just umbrella, and they just try to say fair use because they don't really know.
And then you want to put the statute.
Yeah.
No, it's and so again, it's sketchy, and it also is something that's going to be decided case by case. And the question you have to ask yourself is, do you want to go to court? Do you want to go to court? Because that's basically the bar on YouTube, especially. Yeah. So basically, if somebody strikes your channel, then you can come back and say, all right, well, I'm willing to go to court behind it. And the person who did the striking, have to file in court. And, so like, yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to have to, because, people abuse that system all the time. And it's even worse, I think, on the music end of things. When I say worse, I mean, like, I don't think that somebody should be able to just like throw a whole entire movie on here, stream it and get, I like that, or music and stuff. And I should just be able to upload a song from 1998 and be, generating revenues off somebody else's, intellectual property. I don't agree with that.
And now with AI, fake songs, right? There are rulings that say you don't own that. So anybody, you put out this AI song, anybody can take it and copy anything and just take the whole thing.
Yeah.
Right? And
it doesn't belong to you.
It don't belong to you. And then with some of these platforms that's creating it, you're basically saying that they own it in your agreements. So, yeah. Whatever.
So, I mean, but
all of that point is trying to point towards nobody being able to own anything, so that the people who have the money and the attention can be the ones who profit off of the work.
And I hate it. I hate it when I see that every day on social media in any kind of way, because it always happens, right? It happens that the people who come up with some of the best ideas are not the people who had the broadest reach, because for whatever reason, like, the people who just bubble up are not the people who have the best quality. You know, it's almost like with products too, right? You know, the best product out there is often not the best selling one.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the thing that is the right amount of whatever value, I guess, that people are looking for. But the one thing about that product that's out there that's the best selling is that people are buying it because they know about it. And so, you know, popularity plays into that heavily. And popularity and quality are two totally different things. And so when you look at somebody like Frankie Lyman's life and how his life could have been different if he had the money.
Yeah.
If he was sitting on money as a result of all his hard work in his youth, because he was 13 years old. That's like childhood.
Right. But part of it is the distribution channels. Back in those days, you could not record your own song. You just couldn't do it.
We have what we like to call our bedtime binge playlist. And what that is a playlist of videos that you probably haven't seen across all of our channels. So go ahead, hit the link in the description. And when you get ready to go to bed, just put that on and let it play and get to see one of our videos that you probably haven't seen.
So you had to hope and wish for somebody who would pay for you to record the song so that they could put it out and make money off of it, right? So then once they do that, then they own it. And that's not necessarily the person with talent. The person who's picking the songs that get put on the radio and TV aren't the people with the talent per se, not all the time. You know what I'm saying? So they are basically I hate this term now. They were the true gatekeepers of things.
And maybe a nice way to say it could be that they were the curators.
No, they were straight gatekeepers.
They were gatekeeping, but they were also curating.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were curating, and some people, they were just good. They know songs that a lot of people are going to like. So, and Clive Davis probably was like that, right?
Yeah.
Plus also being one of the few people who had access to those distribution channels at scale.
Which I should go back and say, which is part of the gift that the people who are popular have. People who are popular are not talentless, and I'm certainly not saying that. I'm saying that their talent is having that sense of what will be popular, what is going to sell, who I have to be to present myself and get the most response, right?
Not so much now, because you can start it. And so you go somewhere and you see that somebody, you can look at their ratio of likes to views and and all of that, right? And subscribers and then you take the thing that you see is popular.
Yeah.
And then it's also going to be popular. In it's the same context, right? Because it's the same audiences, demographics of audiences. You take somebody who's popular with the 2,000 subscribers, you show it to your 20,000, and it's still popular. That's what changed with the record labels in a sense, right? So they would go out, they would see the teenagers, oh my God, you wrote this, y'all can sing, right? And they had to find people who were talented and find songs that were good. Now, we make the songs and then they come to you and be like, we give you some money because we know it's popular and it works because the numbers are online already that show that people wanted it, which is two totally different things. One person can recognize and the other person, you just look at numbers and say, oh, clearly it works.
Yeah. It's just, ugh.
Yeah, but I love these conversations. You know, this is my my
I mean,
area.
but
believe me,
y'all, we have had so many battles because not just about our channel here, but just because of the nature of what we do for our business beyond what we're doing here. It creates intellectual property, and we have had people try to lift that in a number of different ways, and it's crazy that it's like, okay, but this is my intellectual property. Like, you don't own that. You can't sell. You may have the right to use it, but you can't sell my intellectual property to a third party.
And it's like,
without paying me.
I have an old catalog of music, right? That, I wish could be out there, but all the stuff not right for everybody to get paid. So it's just, I don't know. It could be wrong if I just like, whatever. You know what I'm saying?
And put it out and you collect all the money. Yeah. Yeah, that's just like the hard part of it all. And even still, and this is a lot harder of a thing to prove, but even things like ideas and the intellectual property of kind of coming up and telling a story, right? Because ultimately, when you get to discussing things like fan theories or fan fiction and some of the other things that we do when we let our imaginations run wild on our channels, is it creates something that was not literally out there. And we have had people who have come to the channel and be like, oh, go thank so-and-so because they said this or that. Recently, regarding one of our... regarding probably our most famous fan theory, the one about O-Dog being the alter ego of Kane in Menace to Society, somebody came to us and was like, oh yeah, my film professor wrote about this, talking specifically about our fan theory. And I said, oh no, let me go. And in his book, so I was able to find the book online, and I had to confront that person. I was like, they did not talk about this. This is not, like they mentioned the movie Menace to Society. It has zero to do with our fan theory or anything else, but people are eager to try to equate something that somebody else said that wasn't specific to this. Oh, they talk about this movie.
To try to cut it down.
To try to cut it. And I'm like, why we do that to each other? I don't know.
The whole thing with the intellectual property. So like back in the day, you had like Amazon. They had a patent back in the late 90s for one click, right? So these pieces of software, you'd be like, oh, this person came up with this novel idea, right? And that's what's granted a patent. But then I don't know, certain things are still being enforced, but other things like Snapchat comes out with what became stories and who knows what other names they have now. Every other platform copies everything that every other platform does. So any other innovative
short form
idea,
videos,
everybody is going to copy it, make it look exactly the same. You just swipe up and it's a heart and a comment thing and a whatever, all looking exactly the same. And it's just the wild west.
But you know what?
So any smaller company who does anything and try to gain steam, the monopolies just eat them up by stealing the ideas.
And I guess when it comes to creativity, like one of the most insulting things to a person who actually is creative is to suggest that, like, well, it is
like you should be happy somebody stole your stuff.
Yeah, you should be happy somebody stole your stuff. But beyond that, if you're creative and you are making things, talking about things, and at the same time, I recognize that there is nothing new under the sun, so to speak, and that two people can come up not having copied each other, but have the same idea within a similar space and time, and not have copied off one another either. But for people who are creative, like what you see happening in our culture at this point is just so insulting to just what viewers and people who would consume the art deserve.
Yeah.
It's just insulting. Like, why you serve up slop?
Yeah.
Like, no.
But if somebody, come up with a song back in the 1950s and then these certain individuals and corporations are eating off of it, then the people who they left behind, if they're gone, or even themselves, should be able to be the ones profiting off of that stuff that they created. That's if they created it, right? Not just necessarily lended a hand to it. Because also, just because an artist sung a song doesn't mean they had really any parts in putting that thing together.
And the tough part with today is that it's just because a person is credited as a songwriter doesn't really say what their actual contribution was.
Yeah. So we're assuming a lot of things about people that's just not.
That's not true. Because there were people who, like some big stars who I was under the impression were doing a lot more of the writing. Because, I think that musicians get a lot more respect when they are considered songwriters in addition to singing or, playing an instrument. Like if they're a songwriter and they can sing pretty well, that's an extra point. And if they play an instrument on top of that, that's like an extra point. And if they're like, oh, and I'm also producing my stuff, then I think that there is a lot more industry respect. And I think that that's what people are trying to establish and not only that, but the money, of course, because tying yourself to the songwriting piece of it is getting you paid.
Yeah.
If you listen to Dozier Holland from their time at Motown, they quickly realized that that's where the money is.
And then a term that's popular now, in perpetuity.
In perpetuity, yeah. I hate when certain people learn new words.
Yeah, because the thing is that when people are, let's say we have somebody who's an artist who's also a label head, and then they're talking about someone's contract how terrible it is when you putting out shitty contracts. You ain't shit.
How about the fact that
You know
just
what I'm
happened
saying?
recently? I know you're not bringing up any names. Go to the comment and name the name of the person who just had, just gave a, I don't know if you'd even call it like diss freestyle or whatever, maybe one-liners where, at a concert where he was getting at a bunch of people who I guess throughout the years have thrown shots at him, but he used the word in perpetuity. Bruh.
Yeah.
Like, that's like calling somebody a slave, but not acknowledging that you're a slave owner.
Yeah, like especially when you say like capitalism is the new N word. Like, come on.
I mean, some people are just not to be trusted, and he's one of them. But he's well loved, So there's your popularity, and he has a whole lot of money.
He does write songs though, so.
Yeah, he writes songs.
He deserves the credit on the things that he actually wrote.
Credit, it's just that that some of them deals that were cut are just it's a nasty business.
Yeah.
So yeah, but this is the story of why do fools fall in love. Like I said, go to the comments and please tell us if hey, Zola didn't really even exist, or of course we know she exists because she was in the Platters, but some tidbit, because I found it so fascinating. One of the things that a lot of people were saying were how even certain scenes were not even real, and that, like, Tina Turner later admitted that, and I was less familiar with some of that stuff. So I really appreciated hearing that from you all, because I mean, none of us know everything. We can't know everything.
That's why we like these movies, right?
Yeah.
So the newer movies we don't like because it's like, oh, that's not accurate and stuff, but you only like the other stuff because you don't even know about it. So we're judging on two different things. You're like, oh, The Temptations, the greatest thing ever. You think that stuff happened. Why do fools fall? That stuff didn't happen. You know what I'm saying? But then you like, oh, that Whitney Houston movie, they showed this before this.
Yeah. Y'all go to the comments and let us know if we should cover I Want to Dance with Somebody. That was kind of the official Whitney Houston biopic that I have said a number of times that I hated because, I'm your number one fan, Whitney Houston. But I just knew too much about Whitney and every performance, and had, from childhood, like this was the first album I ever owned was Whitney Houston's self-titled album, that came out in the 80s. And yeah, but anyway, let us know if you want us to cover that. A lot of you guys are missing videos because you're not getting your YouTube notifications. We just had somebody last week talking about, oh, I see y'all not covering this, that, or the other. Yeah, we put that video out a couple months ago and you just didn't know about it, unfortunately. So go to the description and click the link to subscribe to our mailing list. You're going to get an email and you'll never miss another video from us again.
If you made it this far, type in perpetuity in the comments so we'll know you're one of the real ones who stick around forever.
How do you spell in perpetuity? Anyway, go ahead and visit axiom.app for links to all of our recent videos in one place with links to them back on YouTube so you can watch them here.